VBS this week?
Yeah.
Did you? Would you come again next year if we did it again?
Yeah.
Well, you need to turn around so you can see the screen, so sit down. For the adults, we averaged about 52 kids a day. We had 65 that enrolled, and I think it was 15 were for the community. Last year we had a maximum of 42, so we've increased by almost 20% in our enrollment. After we go to lunch, you guys are getting some special gifts, aren't you? Yeah, we're getting the backpacks and yeah, that's the only reason you guys came today, I know that. But we did that on purpose for those of you who don't know that. One of the ways we've increased our enrollment is by the backpacks. All right, guys. Now, this week we were talking about Cactusville, which was in Arizona. And Arizona is as hot as it is here. Did you know that?
No.
Or we're as hot as Arizona. So we were experiencing the heat this week of Arizona in VBS. In fact, in the gym, I think we were probably 20 degrees hotter than the rest of the city of Redding. It was hot in there, wasn't it? When you see little kids pouring sweat down their forehead, you know it's got to be hot. Before I go on, can I get all the volunteers who helped? If you volunteered, if you were one of the wranglers or one of the adults for VBS, could you stand for me, please? I want you to look around and see some of the people who helped. Thank you very much. I really, really do appreciate all your help. All right, you guys can't see the screen if you're sitting on the steps. You need to sit. No, I want you to look at this screen. This one's different. This one's different, so you need to sit down there. All right, well, when I was your age, they used to have a lot of cowboy and westerns on TV. They don't have that anymore. Good stuff like Bonanza and the Wild Wild West and Wagon Train and Roy Rogers and all those good westerns that you guys kind of missed. But you know, Hollywood has glamorized that. And for being a cowboy out on the plains, it wasn't always easy. In fact, anyway, I got getting ahead of myself. This was the golden nugget that you guys all remember. Do you guys remember that? Can you read that for me? Every day we did this. Come on, read this for me. Isn't that awesome? These guys did a really good job memorizing that text. So as the puppets told us, there was a different character and a different theme each day. Monday was the call to be different, and the Bible character was John the Baptist. And we could all agree that John the Baptist was a little different. Called to be faithful, Abraham. And then on Wednesday we did what? Called to forgive, like Joseph. Now what did Joseph have to, who did he have to forgive? His brothers. Do your brothers or sisters ever pick on you? Oh, sometimes they do. Yeah, sometimes we got to forgive our brothers and sisters, don't we? And there's a call to serve, and Deborah served. We should tell our church that women can serve. Did I say that out loud? I'm sorry. Scratch that from the tape. And then on Friday, Friday's the day that I got to come in and talk to you about the Bible character, and that was Jesus. And what was it so special about Jesus? What did he do? What did he do? He gave, didn't he? He did. He gave his life so we could have life. So of all the Bible characters, that was my favorite. Well, Cowboys on the Plains was not a glamorous job. In fact, much of what Hollywood presented to us happened in the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s. There were no roads in the Midwest, but they were moving cattle. Many times they were moving cattle from Texas all the way up into Utah. Does anybody know why Utah was so significant? Probably not. But that's where the Mormon movement was going up to Salt Lake City, and they were moving cattle up there. So they had to move them across the plains. And when they went, sometimes it took them 4 months to move cattle from one place to another. And they didn't have rest stops. They didn't have places to get a burger on the way. They didn't have Hotel 8 where they could stop. They slept out in the wilderness, out in the weather. They slept next to their horses. The only baths that they took were in streams, mountain streams. And they spent a lot of time in wide open areas with animals. And those animals sometimes were difficult to deal with. And they had to deal with weather. And the weather in the plains is sometimes difficult. In California, we have earthquakes. That's exactly what they have in the Midwest is tornadoes. And when you're in the Midwest, and anybody who's driven through the Midwest states, east of the Rockies, knows that you can see a long, long ways because there's not mountains in the way and there's not trees. And when you could see this weather coming for 30, 40, 50 miles away, and the weather would come across and it would be windy and it would be cold, and sometimes they'd have these terrible storms, and they didn't have any place to go except out in the wilderness. They were out in the open. And they even drove cattle when it was cold and it would get snowy on the plains. And so the job of a cowboy, and there weren't really many cowgirls, there were just cowboys at the time. There were snowstorms too, and cold. It would get real warm during the day and very cold at night. And they had to live out in the wilderness because their job was to get these cattle from Texas all the way up into Utah, into Colorado, sometimes into Nevada. The life of a cowboy was hard and lonely, and it was totally lived in nature. Now, I want to tell you that there are no cowboys in the Bible. There's no cowboys in the Bible. And that may surprise you, because we think that cowboys are all over the place, but there are no cowboys in the Bible. But there was something else in the Bible, and that was called a shepherd. And a shepherd lived a life that was very close to our cowboys in North America. And in Psalm 78, it says that God chose David his servant and took him from the sheepfolds, from the care of the ewes with the suckling lambs, and he brought him to shepherd Jacob his people. One of the most famous Bible characters was a shepherd, which is the closest I can come up to as a cowboy. So did David have to live out in the wilderness, in the weather? Did he have to wrangle and move animals around? Yeah, he did. And he spent a lot of time out in the wilderness doing what our modern day or our North American cowboys would have been doing. I've got some pictures I want to show you. These are pictures of sheep herders in the Middle East. They're shepherds. And so this is a drawing of a shepherd, but it's not real accurate. Does anybody know where, guys, come on. Does anybody know where David grew up? Does anybody know the town in which David grew up? Anybody know? What? It's the country of Israel, but does anybody know his town? It's a famous town because somebody famous was born there.
Jesus was born there.
Where was Jesus born?
In a farm. On a ranch.
No, he was born in a manger in a place in Bethlehem. And did you know that that's where David grew up? He grew up in Bethlehem. So I've got some pictures. These are the hills around Bethlehem that David would have been having his sheep wander around. That's kind of blasé, isn't it? Now, this is in the 2010, and I was on a hillside, and I was taking pictures out around Bethlehem. And of course, the roads wouldn't have been there, but that's the kind of fields that David would have had his sheep in. Here's another picture of the fields from a different direction. There's a bunch of housing and settlements, but notice how there's not, it's a little different climate, it's a little different, the grass and the trees are a little different, but this is where David would have been taking his sheep. And the Bible tells us that David spent a lot of time out in the wilderness with his sheep, and it also tells us that David learned to play a guitar or a lyre, which is similar to our guitars, and he was a person who wrote a lot of music. He had a lot of time to write music, didn't he? Because he was sitting out with the sheep day after day, night after night. And then, this next picture came from Bethlehem also. This is a cave in which many believe that David would have kept his sheep in the winter. They believe it so much that they turned it into a church. But that's how the sheep were kept in the winters. They weren't put in barns, they were put in caves. And this is a cave on the, it would be the northwest side of Bethlehem. And today you can go and visit it, and they've got a little shrine in there and a little altar, and you can worship in there if you want to. So I want to talk about a few things that we can learn, whether we're a cowboy or a shepherd, that what we can learn about God from being out in nature. Because nature tells us a lot about God. Did you know that? And David learned a lot about God just from hanging out with his sheep and spending time. Did you know that David never had an iPod or a Game Boy? He never had a cell phone? None of that stuff. I wonder how David ever made it. The poor guy would have gone stir crazy. He didn't have all these electronic devices. All he had was rocks and a stick and a sling and a bunch of sheep. Boy, that must have been boring.
Yeah.
But he had his lyre and he wrote songs.
Yeah.
I wonder how much more we would pray and write songs if we didn't have iPhones. I wonder how much closer to God we'd be in nature if we didn't have all the modern conveniences that we have. Oh, and anyway, now I'm not talking to the kids anymore. One of the things that we can learn from nature about God is that God is love. God loves you, and He loves nature. It's okay, just leave it. We can learn that God is love from nature. We can also learn that God is different. Just like on Monday we learned that John the Baptist was different, God is different, isn't He? God is different than us. He's bigger than us. We could see that in nature. The other thing we could see in nature is all the different animals, the different flowers, the plants, the birds. God is different and likes different. He likes variety, just like each one of you is different. God is also faithful, and we could learn that from nature too. Does God take care of the birds in the air and the animals in the fields? He does, doesn't He? Does He take care of you? He even takes care of Anne Marie and her family, doesn't He? We can also learn that God forgives, and David learned this the hard way. But God forgave him for some pretty bad things that he did in his life. David did some pretty bad stuff. If you guys think you've been bad and you've gotten spanked, boy, David should have got spanked 100 times over for some of the things that David did. But God loved him so much he forgave him. And David trusted in God and believed that God forgave him. We also find that God serves in nature. God provides. God is always there. And the most important thing that we can learn is that God gives. And one of the things that each of you did on Friday, what did you guys do for me on Friday? We asked what God gave, and you told me that He gave His life. And I asked you, what can you give to God? What's the best gift that you can give to God? Emma, what did you say? You can give Him your heart, can't you? So what you did was you wrote your name on these hearts and you put it on the cross because you said you wanted to give your heart to Jesus because He gave His life for you. And that was the best day of the week when you gave your heart to Jesus. Don't forget that commitment, that you gave your life to Jesus. And every one of your hearts is still up here in the very place that you put it. And I wonder, have the adults here given their hearts to Jesus? I wonder if they would like to give their hearts to Jesus like you did. Because God has given the best gift in the universe to us. And all He wants us is to love Him back. And the best thing that you can give Him is your life. And I hope you guys remember that this coming year. I hope you come back to VBS next year. And I hope that next year it's twice as good as this year. And you remember all the lessons that you were taught. And you remember that you gave your heart to Jesus this year at VBS. Would you like to pray with me, with the children? And for those of you who might not have given your heart, if you would like to come forward, you can give your heart today to Jesus. So I'm going to give you a minute in case somebody else would like to give their heart to Jesus. Sure. Eli, you want to recommit your life? Come on forward. I'm gonna have you kneel down with the kids as we pray. Kyle, it's good to see you. Don't be bashful. It's okay. I'll give you just a second in case you want to change your mind. This is good for the soul to do this once in a while.
What is it for?
So